The history of food in Germany has pretty much always been a touchy subject, but we'll start at the end of World War I when Germany had a major problem. You see, the Treaty of Versailles had taken 13% of their territory and slashed the amount of available fertile land, meaning a food deficit was imminent. This wasn't exactly a new problem. Germany had already struggled with self-sufficiency, but this blow made it harder than ever, and it wouldn't take long for the nation to find itself in a state of economic strain, hyperinflation, distribution challenges, and social unrest. This was the national state of mind that the Nazi Party abused to come into power. They began preparing the populace for a wartime diet. The Third Reich discouraged the consumption of food like white bread, meat, and butter in favor of brown bread, fish, and margarine. Another one of their nutritional innovations was the promotion of Quark, milk-based animal feed, and of course, Eintopf. Eintopf, literally meaning one pot, was an everything casserole made of potatoes, vegetables, and anything else you could get your hands on, sometimes thickened with flour and designed to stretch out the low-quality cuts of meat. Families were supposed to make Eintopf on the first Sunday of every month and donate their savings to the Winter Help Fund, a charity established to assist less fortunate Germans during the colder months. Nazi leaders posed with Eintopf for pictures to transform the wartime meal into a social ritual to strengthen and unite the country through perceived group sacrifice. Still, many Germans found the flavorless food to be disheartening and the meals to be dull and monotonous. Even so, the Third Reich promoted an ongoing, persistent state of malnutrition for some Germans, especially the poor, and things would only get worse. By the time World War II broke out, it was alleged that some civilians got so little food that for nourishment, they took to raising cats, calling them roof pigs. Anyhow, when all was said and done, these new nutritional policies had reduced consumption of meat by 17%, milk by 21%, and eggs by 46%. Another way Nazi Germans fought off hunger was by encouraging soldiers to live off the land, especially when food was scarce and supply lines had been cut. They took food from wherever they were, whether it be from an existing farm, civilians, or just the wilderness. They butchered horses, captured from enemies, and so on. In fact, thousands of horses became food for troops on both sides of the war. Nazi soldiers only had access to daily iron rations consisting of 300 grams of beef, pork, or turkey, and 150 grams of hard bread, so they needed to make up where they could. They had mobile field kitchens delivering soup, stew, and coffee, and even got candy as a pick-me-up after particularly tough battles. However, as you might imagine, elite troops and SS had even better rations with their food perks. Nazis also ate Mussolini potatoes with their Italian allies, the German term for macaroni and spaghetti. When it came to Hitler himself, the reality was entirely different. Hitler's meals were meticulously prepared, and he had a personal chef. His meals were often low in fat, vegetarian, and prepared with fresh ingredients. And we suspect that Italian cuisine must have been a favorite of the Germans, because as it turns out, Hitler's last meal was pasta and tomato sauce, and today we are recreating that notorious dish.
Hitler's last meal wasn't anything special. Actually, it was pretty much ordinary pasta with tomato sauce.
So how did this dish end up on the plate of one of the most evil men in history? Well, pasta itself has been around for thousands of years, and its versatility has given it a long life of enjoyment and innovation. Since pasta can be molded into almost any shape, ancient humans began by rolling the dough by hand into long, flat shapes, like modern lasagna. These were the simplest and easiest at the time, but more shapes were created as technology advanced. The introduction of the pasta press allowed pasta like ravioli, spaghetti, and ribbons. Tomato sauce, surprisingly, didn't join pasta as a topping until the 19th century, and this is because that dynamic duo lived continents apart and were separated by a sea. The tomatoes were a product of the New World, and whereas it was unknown to Europeans, the first tomato sauces were actually made by ancient South Americans. The first tomatoes used in pasta is actually from a French dish, but the marriage of tomato and pasta is indeed said to have taken place in Naples, Italy. Now, you might be wondering, why didn't Hitler consume pasta with meat? Well, it wasn't because of rationing. Nazi soldiers ate meat on a daily basis, and even civilians had meat in their one pot. Hitler didn't eat meat because he was a vegetarian. The whole Nazi Party was vehemently for animal rights, and even instituted many laws protecting them. Whether this was all for show or actually an ingrained part of Hitler's identity, letters found from his chef in his bunker recalled that he had meals of soup, eggs, vegetables, mineral water, and occasionally a little bit of caviar to spice up his diet. It's speculated that the Italian dish, his last meal, spaghetti, was prepared in the hopes of cheering him up as the Soviet army approached. The environment Hitler ate his last meal was very eerie. Located 55 feet under the Nazi chancellery in Berlin, Hitler's air raid shelter was lavish and well equipped. The 3,000 square foot bunker was fully self-sufficient with its own electricity and water supply, as well as heating when it got cold down there. The complex was comprised of 2 connected shelters and had 18 small rooms filled with expensive carpets, furniture, and artwork. Hitler's favorite painting of Frederick the Great hung on the wall of his private quarters. Hitler spent his final 105 days in this bunker as the Red Army closed in and the Allies' unceasing bombings wore on. It's said that he used what was left of his time micromanaging the shrinking Nazi military and meeting with his generals late into the night, often into the next morning. As Allies got closer to ending their regime, the bunker descended into darkness and debauchery. The constant threat of death mixed with claustrophobia basically made everyone more insane than they already were. The wine cellars were running dry, and Hitler himself was addicted to powerful opioids prescribed to treat his ailing health. To the contrary, it warrants mentioning that there is speculation Hitler left the bunker when he took his dog, Blondie, around the ruins of the Chancellery grounds. And if true, these daily strolls were one of his last pleasures before it became too dangerous to go outside. But again, take that with a grain of salt. Speculation. While in the bunker, Hitler ate the vegetarian cuisine prepared by one of his other chefs, Constanze Manzerli, for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. She served him bowls of millet and linseed oil, vegetable soup, corn on the cob, and cake. In a letter to her sister, she complained about being unable to please the Fuhrer with her food, recalling it seemed that he had one foot in the grave. Then, when Hitler received word that his troops defending Berlin were rapidly running out of ammo, he ordered his remaining troops to attack, but was ignored. Hitler flew into a rage, realizing the war had been lost. As his rage cooled down, he looked like a ghost, even worse than he did before. What's more, he had been informed of Mussolini's defeat, execution, and humiliation in Italian streets, hung upside down from a lamppost. Hitler was determined not to share that same fate, so he decided to end his life. Eva Braun said that she would die alongside him, and for her loyalty, he married her. From there, Hitler instructed his physician to feed Blondie a cyanide pill to test its effectiveness. It seemed like his streak of being against animal cruelty ended when he tested that cyanide pill on his beloved dog, but he was still beside himself with grief when the animal died. With the pills ready, he gave some to his staff, saying he was sorry he had no better gift. On the evening of April the 30th, 1945, his cook did not realize that he had passed. She was busy in the kitchen, preparing fried eggs and mashed potatoes. His chef played a key role in recording this history, as before the discovery of her letters in 2017, there were a couple of theories on what Hitler's last meal could have been. For example, in Downfall, a 2004 film detailing Hitler's final days in the bunker, it was claimed that the Fuhrer had ravioli with cheese instead of meat due to his vegetarianism. Then we have a 2005 book, Last Suppers, Legends of History and Their Final Meals, claiming that Hitler's last meal was vegetable soup and mashed potatoes. Another source says his last meal was spaghetti with raisins and cabbage salad. Not too far off from the pasta and tomato sauce, perhaps, but as it seems, no one knows definitively what the truth is. What these theories do tend to agree upon is that Hitler often ate as well, if not better, than the Nazi soldiers he oversaw, and that he stuck closely to his vegetarian diet, highlighting major hypocrisy and paradox in the man.
So this meal seems like it's more full of sorrow than full of flavor.
Yeah, of course. I mean, considering your family's stories, even, I couldn't imagine how hard this topic must be for you and the millions of people by now that have been directly affected by the actions of a lunatic. But I think it's important to also consider the more subtle details of those stories, like the looting, the thievery. These guys consider themselves elitist above all, not even in an academic sense, but in a sadistic, superior human being sense. So of course they would be sitting around eating spaghetti as others starved. Insane.
So hard to say bon appetit, but let's give it a try. It's only good because I made it.
Very true. I'd also point out that just because this was Hitler's last meal, we shouldn't let him hijack the dish. This existed long before him, and as you guys can see now, people will be eating it long after him as well. Adolf Hitler's last meal is believed to have been on April the 29th, 1945, in the Führer bunker in Berlin. It was the day before his suicide on April the 30th, 1945. Around the time of Hitler's death, many other world leaders enjoyed various meals. Franklin Roosevelt ate cheap, poor-tasting food like deviled eggs with tomato sauce, mashed potatoes, and prune pudding to promote the First Lady's nutritional initiative for the country during the Great Depression. Before he met his end, Mussolini ate a salad of raw garlic and olive oil, all while drinking 3 quarts of milk every day. When Winston Churchill announced the end of World War II on Victory Day, he enjoyed English dishes like chicken and roast beef with Yorkshire pudding. It's telling that the Allied leaders were dedicated to their country's food, while the Axis dictators ate foreign foods and frowned upon their own. It seems like everything the Nazis did was calculated and evil, especially when it came to food. Another way the Nazi regime attempted to attain food security was by conquering the neighboring countries and bringing German farmers to grow crops on stolen land. They enacted this plan when invading Poland and modern-day Ukraine and Soviet Russia to get their fertile land. They systematically killed so many, quote, useless eaters and starved millions, expelling native populations to make room for themselves. But the plan didn't work. They didn't have enough people to work the land, so the Third Reich imported millions of workers as slave laborers. So comparatively, Nazi Germany remained well-fed until 1944, but not without the unthinkable suffering of millions. All the while, Hitler enjoyed his elitist vegetarian food and spaghetti.